Srila Prabhupada appeared in this world in Calcutta, now Kolkata, in 1896, and he was born at the house of his maternal grandparents. And when Srila Prabhupada was a little boy, his father, Gaur Mohan Dey, a pure devotee of Krishna, very much desired for his son to become a pure devotee. Like parents want their child to grow up, my son's going to be the president of the United States someday, or he's going to become a policeman or a fireman or a great scientist or a scholar. The parents always have their aspirations for their children, which sometimes work out, and many times they do not even close. But Srila Prabhupada wanted that his son, Abhay Charan Dey, become a great devotee of Srimati Radharani, the consort of Lord Krishna. When we speak of Krishna, we speak of Radha Krishna together. Radha is the internal potency, the pleasure potency of Lord Krishna. And she is the greatest devotee of Krishna. So Gaur Mohan wanted Abhay to become a great devotee of Srimati Radharani and a preacher of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is one of the principal scriptures of the Vaishnavas, or the devotees of Lord Krishna. Both of those things did come true. In pursuance of that vision he had for his son, when he was 5 years old, he hired a professional mridanga teacher to teach him, the little boy, how to play the mridanga. And Abhay, as a 5-year-old, could barely reach either end of the drum at the same time. Yet he was instructed in playing mridanga beats at such a young age, and he became very proficient, and later on became expert harmonium player also. And he was a great musician, a great singer, and demonstrated the art of kirtan. And he spread this kirtan all over the world as well, which is amazing, fulfilling the prediction of Lord Chaitanya that in the future, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu predicted, as it's written in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, that someday the chanting, Haibi Moranam, of my holy name, will be heard in as many towns and villages as there are on the surface of the earth. And this has come to pass. Later, it was predicted by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the great reformer and pioneer of Krishna consciousness, who preached and wrote books mainly in the 19th century and lived into the beginning of the 20th century. He said, soon there will appear a great personality who will spread this chanting of the holy names of Krishna all over the world. That prediction came to pass as well, because Srila Prabhupada is the person who did that. Not anyone could do that. Actually, only Srila Prabhupada could do it. Now, in retrospect, when we look back at Srila Prabhupada, we can understand that he was especially to spread the holy names all over the world. And in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna Shakti Vina Nahi Tarpavartana. Kali Kalera Dharma Krishna Nam Sankirtan. The Dharma for this yuga, the age of Kali, which we've been in for about 5,000 years, since the disappearance of Lord Krishna in around 3102 BCE, that Krishna Shakti Vina Nahi Tarpavartana. No one can spread this chanting of the holy names unless they are imbued with Krishna Shakti, unless they are, Krishna Shakti means the power, the spiritual energy of Lord Krishna. So no one can do that. This statement was spoken to Lord Chaitanya himself by Vallabhacharya, the founder of the famous Pushti Marg Sampradaya, which is still going on in Gujarat and in Rajasthan. Their headquarters is the temple of Nathdwar, and the deity of Srinathji, a deity of Krishna, who's pretty famous deity of Krishna, especially amongst the Gujaratis. He was actually the deity that was discovered in the bushes in the jungle in Vrindavan by Sri Madhavinda Puri, a predecessor Acharya in the line of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Madhavindra's, one of his disciples, became the initiating spiritual master of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, Lord Chaitanya, he is Krishna himself. But he comes in a special mood of liberally distributing the holy name. And so he is the second descendant from Sri Madhavinda Puri, who discovered this Nathji deity in Vrindavan, and later that deity was transferred to the town of Nathdwar in Rajasthan, and is very famous. You find in many of our ISKCON temples this Sri Nathji deity. He's very beautiful, blackish Krishna deity. So anyway, this was spoken by Sri Vallabhacharya to Lord Chaitanya, and he was saying that you must be imbued with Krishna Shakti. He didn't actually know that he was Krishna himself, Lord Chaitanya. Krishna coming, but as it's explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna Varnam Tvisha Krishnam, Sangopangrasta Parshadam. He comes, but not in the blackish form like Lord Krishna, but in a golden form. And Jagyai Sankirtana Prayer, he spreads this Sankirtan Jagya, this chanting of the holy names. Yajantihi Sumedasaha, the Bhagavatam concludes in that verse, that Meda means intelligence, and Sumeda means those who are possessed of very good intelligence. So Prabhupada translates that those who have sufficient intelligence, they will take to this chanting of the holy names. They will become part of this Sankirtan movement. Yagyai Sankirtana Prayer, Yajantihi Sumeda Saha. So that means every one of you are Yajantihi Sumeda Saha, because you're coming to this Krishna consciousness movement and chanting the holy names. So that is a wonderful qualification. Not everyone does in the world do that. Otherwise, we would be really full in here. We would have millions of people out in the courtyard, all hankering to hear the kirtan. But those who have sufficient intelligence, they understand. So then after the time of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he empowered his disciples, especially Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, to write books on the science of devotional service. In Sri Vrindavan Dham, and also in Bengal, in Orissa, and even in Manipur. But within a couple of generations, the preaching was not going on strongly. And then there were various other groups claiming to be followers of Lord Chaitanya, but who concocted different bogus philosophies about Krishna consciousness. And at the heart of most of those bogus groups was the lack of following of the regulative principles of Krishna consciousness. So then Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur came along in the 19th century, and he revived the Krishna consciousness movement. He wrote over 100 books. He was a district magistrate in the British Raj government of India, and English educated, and he was a great philosopher. And so he wrote in English and Bengali and Sanskrit, and he translated Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Actually, he couldn't find Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. He'd heard about it. He could not find a copy. He searched high and low for years. And finally, he found a copy in the Odisha language. And of course, he in Odisha. And he with that language, a great scholar, Sanskrit, Bengali, English, the Odisha language. And then he translated it to Bengali, although it was written in Bengali originally, and published it along with a commentary. That commentary is known as the, what is it called? Amrita Pravaha Bhasya. Is that the commentary by Dhirodatta Thakur? There are two commentaries, one by him and one by his son, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. One is called the Sri Bhashya, one is called the Amrita Pravaha Bhasya. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was the son of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of many, he had 14 children. And he is the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada. So in 1922, at that time, Prabhupada was 26 years old, a young householder with a wife and child, and working in the pharmaceutical industry. And his childhood friend, Narendranath Mulik, came to him one day and said, Abai, there is this wonderful sadhu who is preaching right here in Calcutta. And since you are the leader of our group and everyone looks up to you, we would like you to come meet him and get your opinion. Now, when Srila Prabhupada was a child, every day his father, although not a wealthy man, just a modest cloth merchant, would receive sadhus in his home and feed them prasadam, as is the tradition in Vedic culture. You invite the sadhu, you feed the sadhu. And that is the duty of the householder, because generally the sadhus are sannyasis and beggars and not very wealthy, but it is the duty of the householders to feed the sadhus. So Srila Prabhupada had seen many of these sadhus, many of whom he did not have a very high opinion of. He said there was one man in his neighborhood who would every day, instead of go to work like a normal person, put on the dress of a sadhu and go out and beg. And then whatever collection he make, he would go home and live his grihastha life. So that's not a sadhu. That's bogus. That's a cheater. He was just begging in the dress of a sadhu just to maintain himself. So he had seen many such sadhus. And so when Narendranath told him about this sadhu, Bhaktisiddhanta, who was preaching the message of Lord Chaitanya very nicely, Prabhupada demurred. I have seen so many sadhus. When I was a child, the sadhus were coming to my house every day, and they were all bogus. So why should I come see this sadhu? No, Narendranath said, you have to go. He grabbed him by the arm, and they were good friends. They were out on the street talking in the evening. And Narendranath was pulling him, you come. He's like, no, pulling back. Finally, okay, all right. I will go see your sadhu. There's so many sadhus. I know all these sadhus. They're all fake. So he went. And then they went to this Ultadanga Junction, number 1, a house, which now is in the possession of ISKCON. And they went up onto the roof where there was Bhaktisiddhanta was speaking, giving darshan. His disciples were there. And so when they saw him, he is a sannyasi. So the tradition is offer obeisances to the sadhu, to a sannyasi. They're respected for their spiritual acumen and renunciation. And before they even got up from offering their obeisances, Bhaktisiddhanta said, you two are educated young men. You should preach Krishna consciousness all over the world. And Srila Prabhupada was like, what? You didn't talk to this guy. I met him. Now he's telling me to go all over the world, preach Krishna consciousness. What the heck is going on here? So the darshan went on, and Bhaktisiddhanta was preaching so nicely the message of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And as Srila Prabhupada heard him more and more, he began to realize, he said, I've never seen or heard a sadhu like this. This is a real sadhu. He is so expert. And Bhaktisiddhanta was an incredible scholar. He had a perfect memory. He spent some time in the court of one king, teaching the king's sons, the court pandit. And this king had a vast library. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati read every book in the library. It just so happens, not by chance, that he had an eidetic memory. He could instantly recall anything he'd ever read, word by word. He memorized everything he ever read. Incredible genius, the likes of which the world has never seen. Later on, his disciples called him living encyclopedia. He said, my Guru Maharaj could talk with anyone on any subject, and no one could defeat him. He was a very powerful preacher of Krishna consciousness. He was also a Naishtika brahmachari, a lifelong brahmachari, fully sense-controlled, amazing personality, so powerful in his presentation. He said that big scholars, when they would see even his neophyte disciples, they would cross the street and go the other way because they know they're going to get defeated in any kind of philosophical argument or discussion. And he was only interested in the conclusions of pure bhakti, and he did not tolerate any statements against the conclusions, the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Very powerful. And Srila Prabhupada realized, wow, Naren, you were right. This is the real deal. And then he said to himself, he said, I immediately accepted him within my heart as my spiritual master. This is the real sadhu. This is the real Krishna conscious man. This is the real preaching of the Vedic knowledge. And then that was in 1922. He didn't have the occasion to take initiation from Bhaktisiddhanta until 11 years later in 1933. And he became his duly initiated disciple. And he changed his name from Abhay Charan to Abhay Charanaravinda, one who is fearless at the lotus feet of Krishna. So a few years later, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta passed away from this world. And he had established the Gaudiya 64 temples in India, a very powerful preaching force with, I think there were at least 4 printing presses throughout India, and preaching on the radio. He was always traveling, preaching, going here and there. He was very famous throughout India. And then when he left, his movement splintered and fell apart because his disciples, his leading disciples, wanted to take his position and become the acharya, something that he had never said to do. He had said to form a cooperative, what he called a governing body, to carry on the preaching activities. But then everything splintered and fell apart and disintegrated into legal battles over the physical assets of the Gaudiya Math. And even the printing presses were sold off to pay legal expenses. But Srila Prabhupada just kept on writing. He founded Back to Godhead magazine in 1944. He wrote a translation of the Bhagavad Gita into English, a 1,200-page manuscript that was mysteriously stolen in the late 1940s. Imagine that, writing a book like that, such important English translation of the Gita, and then it disappeared, all the work gone, finished. Later again, he wrote the translation, along with translating the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, which is, the Gita is some 700 verses, the Bhagavatam is some 18,000 verses. So that was considered to be his life's work, his magnum opus, the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then, when he had translated the first canto of the Bhagavatam, which was 3 volumes, He had printed those books, self-financed the printing. He did all the typing of the manuscripts. He did the editing. He did the galley proofs. He worked with the printer. He got the paper, and they would deliver the paper by rickshaw from the paper wallet to the printers. Not the work of one man, yet it was the work of one person. He did himself. And then finally, he came to America, having secured a free passage on a commercial steamer, the ship Dhirodatta. And he came armed. Sometimes devotees say he came with a few books. Actually, he came with 200 sets of the books and trunks, 600 books, more than a few books. And he began his preaching in 1965 in New York City and gradually began to accumulate a few followers, revived the publishing of Back to Godhead magazine, and began to unfold his plans to preach Krishna consciousness and spread this movement all over the world. So ambitious. But he said, this was the order of my Guru Maharaj. Right after he took sannyas in the late 1950s, he visited a temple in Bengal where he used to go earlier in his Grihastha days. And he had taken sannyas. He was sitting in the back of the temple. He was chanting his japa. And he was just weeping and weeping. And then the proprietor of the temple, the Mahant, the Pujari, recognized him. And he went to speak to him. He said, I remember you. You came here years ago. You used to come and sit in the back and chant. And now I see you are dressed as a sannyasi. You are coming again. But why are you weeping? Why are you crying? What does it matter? And he said, my spiritual master has given me an impossible task. And I don't know it. And so the Mahant asked him, well, what is that task that he has given you that is so impossible? He said, he has ordered me to preach Krishna consciousness all over the world and make the whole world Krishna conscious. Imagine that. Now, there were other disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta. And when they were interviewed and asked about this, what about this order of preaching Krishna consciousness all over the world? They said, oh, he was always saying that. He was saying that to all his disciples. He was saying that to everybody. But Srila Prabhupada took it into his heart that this is the order of my spiritual master. Now, in the Vedic concept, the order of the spiritual master is to be taken by the disciple as his life and soul. And this concept comes from a commentary on Bhagavad Gita by, who was it, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, on a verse in the second chapter, Vyavasayatmika buddhi ekeha kurunandana. Ekeha means one-pointed. One should focus oneself in Krishna consciousness. Ekeha kurunandana, with one-pointed attention. Eka means one. So when Srila Prabhupada was writing his translation, he was reading the commentary of Vishwanath Chakravarti, and he was struck. The order of the spiritual master should be taken as the life and soul of the disciple. And he knew the order of his spiritual master was to preach Krishna consciousness in English all over the world. Now, that was the instruction that was given to him even before they were introduced, as he was offering obeisances as a young man in 1922, right before Bhaktisiddhanta disappeared from this world. Srila Prabhupada, 2 weeks before he left, he wrote him a letter. And he said, Dear Guru Maharaj, you have so many disciples as sannyasis and brahmacharis, and they are all serving you very nicely. And I am just a grihastha. The implications meaning family man. I have children, I have job. What can I do? I cannot serve you like they can. What service can I do for you? And then Bhaktisiddhanta wrote him back. In that letter, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said, turn yourself into a very good English preacher and preach all over the world. Communicate this Krishna consciousness message to people who do not speak our languages, like Bengali and Hindi. And he said, this will do very good things for your audience, and it'll also be very good for you if you do this. And Srila Prabhupada recognized, that's the same thing he told me when I first met him. Preach Krishna consciousness all over the world. It's the same instruction. So he took it to heart. He took it as his life and soul. And he was crying and weeping because he's, how can I, just a poor Bengali renunciant with practically nothing, preach this Krishna consciousness all over the world? How was it possible? Therefore, he was crying and weeping. And then he left Bengal, and he got on the steamship with his trunks of books, and he came to America, and he began to preach Krishna consciousness, and very quickly the movement spread all over the world. And Srila Prabhupada began to travel all over the world. He circled the globe 12 times on preaching tours, going to Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, South America, North America. He never came to Tucson, although he did fly over Tucson. One devotee had gone in 1967 or 8 to New Mexico, and he was there by himself in a little house, and Prabhupada went there to encourage that disciple to preach. So he flew from California to Albuquerque, or was it Santa Fe? Santa Fe, yeah. Toshan Krishna, our old friend Toshan. So at least he flew over Arizona. And he did mention Arizona, actually. In terms of the moon landing, but Srila Prabhupada said, they may have gone somewhere, but they did not go to the moon. And then he mentioned a couple of things. One of the things he mentioned was Arizona. Pictures of the rocks. And I recall in 70, I guess it was 1970, when did the Mars rover, first Mars rover land? In the mid-70s. 75, 76, something like that. And they published a picture on the front page of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And it was in color. Back in those days, a color picture on the newspaper was like, wow, that was something, because generally they're black and white. And it showed the picture of the rocks and everything, and said, they have landed on Mars and sent back these pictures. And so we had the newspaper every day at our house. Actually, my stepbrother threw the newspaper, so we always had a copy. And they showed the picture, and oh, it's Arizona. And then the next day they published a corrected picture. They said, oh, we have misinterpreted the color images. And then they showed the same picture, and only this time everything was all reddish. Before they had published it, it was just normal brown rocks and blue sky. Oh, we made a mistake. Then they showed the real picture, which is everything with a red filter on it. Mars, the red planet. Right? And we laughed so hard. I didn't know anything about Krishna consciousness, but I laughed so hard when they published the second picture and it's all red. And my friend, his father was actually a photographer for that newspaper. And we all laughed. Oh, yes. My friend said, oh, yeah, I just put a red filter on it. My dad has one of those. They use that sometime in special effects. So they showed the same picture of Arizona, and that was all red sky and red rocks. Oh, they have gone to Mars. And then Srila Prabhupada was in England when they had the moon landing. And there was one devotee who was all excited. He was into the science and the, NASA and this and that. And they managed to bring a TV into Prabhupada's room to show him the moon landing. And then Srila Prabhupada chuckled. And that devotee's name was Purushottama. He was Prabhupada's servant. And he was all disappointed because Prabhupada didn't embrace the wonderful moon landing. And then a few days later, they were staying at John Lennon's estate. And Prabhupada's cook, Jamuna Devi, was cooking for Prabhupada. And there was some problem with the gas stove. And there was a little fire there, and there was all this soot. And then, so she called out, Purushottama, come, quick, help me. And so he came and he put out the fire, but he was wearing his white dhoti and kurta. And he got completely covered from head to toe with all this soot from putting out the fire. And then he went into Prabhupada's room. Yes, I put out the fire. And Prabhupada at him, and he was covered from head to toe with this black soot. And Prabhupada said, look, Purushottama has gone to the moon. You can imagine how crushed Purushottama was by that. Not a happy camper. Actually, Prabhupada had a great sense of humor. So in this way, we have all received this Vedic knowledge from Srila Prabhupada in the form of his books, his teachings, his devotees whom he personally trained. And we have recordings of his lectures, his conversations, his preaching to newspaper reporters, and his conversations with leading personalities, religious personalities, scientists, philosophers. There was one meeting he had in his garden in the LA temple. They built a little enclosure for him next to the temple with a few plants, and he would gather there with followers, and they would bring important people. And they used to bring scientists. Actually, one of the persons who came to see him was a fellow named Dr. Gregory Benford, a physicist, who was also a science fiction writer, whose books I used to read when I was a teenager. And when I encountered this conversation, I said, oh, that's Gregory Benford. I used to read his books. One scientist, after coming a few different evenings and hearing Prabhupada speak, he said, I have never bowed down, because the devotees would bow down to Srila Prabhupada. He's the spiritual master. He said, I have never bowed down to any man. He said, but after hearing from you, I realize that you are possessed of superior spiritual knowledge, and therefore I bow down to you. He offered his obeisances to Srila Prabhupada. So impressed was he, a very educated, intellectual personality, realizing that he was in the presence of someone who had superior spiritual knowledge, even though he himself was not a spiritualist, but he could recognize this greatness of Srila Prabhupada. And another way we can recognize the greatness of Srila Prabhupada, what they say, the proof of the pudding is in the tasting. So we can see from the results of Srila Prabhupada's preaching that people all over the world are becoming Krishna conscious and chanting the holy names. So it is practical, and it is undeniable what Srila Prabhupada has done. And all of us who follow the teachings of Srila Prabhupada, we know by our personal practical experience what that benefit has given to us and to our lives. And we have seen it transform the lives of not only ourselves, but of thousands and thousands and thousands of countless other persons. So that is the glory and the wonder of Srila Prabhupada and his preaching of Krishna consciousness movement, and his books, especially, of which one of the most famous is Bhagavad Gita. And our Sureshwar Prabhu is standing by. Is there anyone who does not have a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, as it is, by Srila Prabhupada? Oh, there's one boy raising his hand. All right, so there you go. You got a customer. That's Prahlad. Very clever little fellow, isn't he? He wants your book. All right, so thank you very much. We've gone past our time. I'm sorry about that. It was only because Narahari was standing in front of the clock. I couldn't see. So now we'll proceed on to the kirtan, the chanting of the holy names. And on the other side of the kirtan, we will see you in the dining room where we will be serving out the prasadam. And thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.